European Jewish Association and our partners, the Action and Protection League, would like to welcome you to Krakow to this symposium for the next couple of hours. It's my honor as well to welcome you to the gala dinner, which will start at about 7:15, 7:30, depending on how quickly we get through the symposium. We have an awful lot to get through. So if it's okay for now, I will dispense with the pleasantries, other than to say, once again, we are extremely honored and grateful that so many of you were able to make it. Despite the fog and the inclement weather, you're all very, very welcome here to be with us. Without further ado, I would like to introduce you to our initial speakers. Immediately to my left is Rabbi Menachem Margolin, the chairman of the European Jewish Association. Then we have Chairman Rabbi Shlomo Kovesh of the Action and Protection League. And we're also joined on stage by the President of the Austrian National Council, Mr. Wolfgang Sobotka. And representing the Ministry of Culture and Heritage from Poland, the Secretary of State, Mr. Jaroslav Silan. So I would invite our chairman, Rabbi Margolin, to address the symposium. Thank you, Rabbi.
Good afternoon, everyone. President of the Austrian National Council, Mr. Sobotka, Polish Secretary of State of the Ministry of Culture, Minister Selin, Rabbi Kovesh, President of Action and Protection. We're having senior guest, President Minister Jan Jambon from Belgium, and the whole delegation from Belgium. Thank you so much. Hungarian Minister of Justice, Mrs. Verga. Ladies and gentlemen, as Alex rightly presented me, my name is Rabbi Menachem Margolin, and I have the privilege to serve as the chairman of the European Jewish Association. I would like to welcome you to this very important event and seek to thank you for making the effort to come here today. It is important not only for the future of the European Jewry, it is important for Europe, because the rise of the anti-Semitism in Europe does not leave to any peace seeker the luxury to convince himself that condemning with words is enough. Unfortunately, 75 years since the liberation of Auschwitz, and we witnessed too many incidents in too many countries, expression of anti-Semitism, incitements, physical attacks, and murders. The good people that gather here today made the efforts, you made the effort to come, because you understand that this is a fight between the good and the evil, the light and the darkness. And therefore, we thank each one of you for taking the time to make the effort to come here and to be on the good side. The first part of today's program is aimed to recognize the scale of anti-Semitism, to look into the reality, analyze, and try to find out altogether how could we all reduce the level of anti-Semitism, and who knows, with God's help, maybe even to eradicate it. We are a very pragmatic organization. We believe there is place for statements, But given the severity of today's situation, it is not enough. A cross-party and cross-country, an emergency mobilization is required. And therefore, we very much hope to find in each one of you good partners to promote a legislation that will ensure legally that European governments will be committed to ensure our freedom, our future. Thank you very much, and we look forward to the rest of the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Margolin. I now invite Rabbi Kovish to say a couple of words. Thank you, Rabbi Kovish.
Distinguished guests, welcome, and thank you for coming. A few years ago, the deputy party leader of the racist and anti-Semitic party, the Jobbik party in Hungary, was faced with a tragicomic situation. Mr. Szegedy Csanád realized that his adversaries have revealed that his own mother is of Jewish origin, and his grandmother, who was still alive at the time, at the age of 94, is a survivor from Auschwitz from the Second World War. He was faced with this dilemma. What should he do? Should he give up his political, rather dark political career from an anti-Semitic party? What should he do with his past? What should he do with his own family heritage? We at the Jewish community in Hungary were also faced with a dilemma, how to react in such a situation. We didn't dream in our most horrific dreams that this situation will actually knock at our doors. A few days have passed, and Mr. Szegedy Csanád, the person that I have described before, deputy leader of a racist and anti-Semitic party, who has just found out that his grandmother is a Jewish Holocaust survivor, has called my telephone, has knocked at my door. He said he wants to meet me. Well, I was faced with another dilemma, what to do with such a person. What does a rabbi do when an anti-Semitic Jew wants to meet him? Some of my community members said, you cannot meet this guy. He's for sure not honest. He doesn't want to repent. He doesn't want to change his ways. He's just trying to use us, the Jewish community, for his own political purposes. Well, after consulting with many rabbis, I decided I'm going to meet this person. And I must tell you, the experience was overwhelming. This was probably one of the most interesting and most lessonful experiences of my life. First of all, you hardly have, as a rabbi, the chance to meet a vicious anti-Semite, somebody that publicly made anti-Semitic statements, racist statements. You usually don't have the chance to speak eye to eye to such a person in such a format. Second of all, as a rabbi, you probably never have a chance to meet somebody that has such anti-Semitic ideology, that he himself is a descendant of Jewish origin. He himself is a Jew according to the Jewish religious laws. Well, we sat for an hour, maybe over an hour, and the discussion we had is a story to itself. But Mr. Csanád Szegedy said, he wants to say sorry and he wants to change his ways. And it's a whole story in itself, what I have told him. But the question that came up in my mind was, how can it be? How is it possible? He thought my question was, how is it possible that he didn't know that he was Jewish? So he explained to me that although his grandmother was in Auschwitz death camp, and she, just like many others, most of the victims in the Auschwitz camp had a tattoo on her arm. She always used to put on a Band-Aid to cover up that tattoo, so even her own family members, her own children and grandchildren wouldn't realize what she went through in the war and what her origin is. But I didn't mean, when I asked how is it possible, I didn't mean to ask really, How is it possible that you didn't know that you're Jewish? My question was much more general. How is it possible 60, 70, now 75 years after the liberation of Auschwitz, after the Second World War, after so much bloodshed, after so much suffering, how is it possible that a Hungarian teenager will grow up in Europe in the 80s and the 90s, and he would be able to adopt such ideologies that just 70 years ago brought to the bloodshed of millions and brought to the horrific terrors of Auschwitz? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I don't have an answer to this question, but I think today that the reason why we all came here today is to try to find that answer, to try to come together and to try to start finally to wage a war. I don't mean a war with weapons. I mean a war of ideas. Yes, we have to wage a war of ideas, of minds, because although 75 years ago, our parents, grandparents, and soon great-grandparents have waged a war with weapons, sacrificed their own lives in order to overcome the most vicious empire of human civilization. Unfortunately, although they have succeeded physically, spiritually, in the war of minds, we still have a lot to go. So today we are waging a war. 75 years after the liberation of Auschwitz, we are still waging a war. When we wage a war, we need to have our guidelines for the war. I thought today we have to set 3 important guidelines. And I assume all of us here today would agree on these 3 guidelines. Our first guideline would be to be united. Unity. Unity is a beautiful word. It's a beautiful phenomena. We many times mention unity. But as politicians, and even as rabbis, we know unity is very hardly achieved. When it comes to the remembrance of the Holocaust, more and more the idea of responsibility comes up. Politicization of responsibility and the question of who was more responsible for the horrors. Well, we can argue about the different historical narratives, but one thing we should and we all agree upon is that whoever was responsible, the ideas that we talk about are terrible. The ideas that brought to the horrific facts of the Holocaust are the most responsible. And therefore, this is something we can all unite about. The unity that we need to achieve on this war, first and foremost, is to agree that these ideas that brought the horrors of the Holocaust 75 years ago, we all have to fight against, and we all have to be united against. Our second guideline is that whenever we go out to a war, we first have to explore the battlefield. Exploring the battlefield means, as Rabbi Margolin said before, it's not enough to give great statements. Never again. It's an important statement, but what is behind it? When we go to war, before we start shooting, we need to start to explore the battlefield, because the battlefield in Spain, in Poland, in Hungary, in Germany, in Belgium might be slightly different. Anti-Semitism is a vicious virus, but there are many mutations of this virus. The virus is not the same in all the countries. So before we wage the war, we got to find out what are we shooting at. And this is why our first initiative today, and the first initiative we ask you to partner with, all of you in all your esteemed countries here in Europe, is the initiative that we are launching with Action and Protection League to try to collect data. We are launching a ever-first pan-European public opinion survey to find out about more data about the anti-Semitic attitudes all over Europe in all the countries of the continent. We're also launching monitoring of anti-Semitic assaults, which, although there is a recommendation from OSCE, not all European countries have such a system of monitoring. With our launching of the Action and Protection League of Europe, we hope to have all the countries in this initiative of monitoring anti-Semitic assaults. And third, once we learned and we have explored the battlefield of Europe, we have to find and choose our most effective weapons. Just like in a war, you choose the most effective weapon. In the war of minds, you also have to choose the most effective weapon. We strongly believe that the most effective weapon against anti-Semitism is education. Education, education, education. When it comes to a Hungarian youngster, a Hungarian teenager, or any teenager all over Europe, the reason that he or she will be open to these horrific racist ideas is because of the lack of education. And therefore, we are launching today with Action and Protection League, together with European Jewish Association, an initiative of education, of formal education. This is a program we have done already in Hungary, looking through our education system, national educational system, and national educational textbooks, and try to find different suggestions in how to include not only the history of the Holocaust, but the joint history of Judeo-Christian values, the Jewish history of Europe, the Jewish history of our national country, and the relation to the modern state of Israel. So I ask you today to come together with us in this war against anti-Semitism. So tomorrow, when we remember the millions of victims that sacrificed their lives in the fight against these horrible ideas, we shouldn't only remember them and commemorate them, but we should make sure that this really would never happen again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rabbi Kovesh, and for the important work that you're doing with APL. It's always an inspiration to hear. Before we hear from our keynote speaker, Mr. Wolfgang Sobotka, it is my pleasure and honor to invite the Secretary of State from Poland, Mr. Salan, to say a few words of welcome. Thank you so much, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor to be here with you today and to represent Polish government at this important conference, which takes place just a week before the 75th anniversary of the liberation of the German Nazi concentration and extermination camp Auschwitz-Birkenau. The topic of this conference, addressing the need for the Holocaust education in Europe, is crucial today. And there is no better place to learn how it is done than in Poland. Over the centuries, Poland was home to many ethnic and religious communities that settled here to find peace and tolerance. We take pride in our multifaceted national identity, and we always have. For us, being Polish is neither about one ethnicity nor one religion. It is about freedom and solidarity above all. Ladies and gentlemen, we hear since last December, from our perspective, from perspective of Polish nation, Polish state, a little strange thesis about the Second World War from one direction. So because of that, I remember some maybe not well-known facts about this matter. I would like to mention here that Hitler couldn't have come through with his plan of annihilation of Jews in all over Europe until the Polish state was destroyed. The uttermost anti-Semitism of Nazi regime didn't dismay Stalin, leading to the signing of Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact. It is better describe this pact, Hitler-Stalin Pact, of alliance in August of 1939. One must remember the devastation of Jewish cultural and religious heritage in Soviet Union in 20s and 30s, as well as the persecution of Jewish leaders, such as Menachem Begin or other leaders of Beitar movement in Poland, who was arrested by Soviets and sentenced to several years in Gulag. He was freed pursuant to the Sikorski-Majski Pact, and left Soviet Union as an officer of Polish army, led by General Anders. Our country was the first one to oppose Hitler's regime, and thus it became the first victim of the Second World War. Not many know that in Polish army, which fought the uneven defensive war in 1939, both against Germans and next against Soviets, there were almost 100,000 soldiers of Jewish origin. Among Polish officers who were murdered at Stalin's order in Katyn in 1940, some 400 were of Jewish origin, including Baruch Steinberg, the chief rabbi to the Polish army. The Polish government, forced to exile in 1939, never collaborated with Nazi Germany, and the Polish underground state sentenced to death anyone who acted otherwise. Such persons are still considered as traitors by Polish society and are undoubtedly condemned. The Polish government in exile was the first one to alarm the Allies about the atrocities of Holocaust. It was possible thanks to the heroism of many, to name only Witold Pilecki or Jan Karski. The Allied forces didn't take any action to stop the Holocaust, and thus genocide conducted by the Nazis continued until 1945. For Poland, this marks the end of Nazi occupation and the beginning of the Soviet one. Nevertheless, it was even before the war actually ended when those who survived the German Nazi concentration camps located in the occupied territories in Poland decided that the victims of Holocaust and all Nazi crimes deserve commemoration, and the history of genocide has to be preserved and studied. The first museum in the world devoted to documenting and educating about the Holocaust was established in former Konzentrationslager Lublin already in 1944. The first monument commemorating the victims of Holocaust, the memorial to the ghetto heroes, was erected in Warsaw in 1946. The first research institution documenting the Holocaust, the Jewish Historical Institute in Warsaw, was also established in Poland in 1947. Today, given our heritage and history, we still consider ourselves custodians of the memory of both our centuries-long coexistence with Jews in Poland and atrocities of Holocaust conducted by the German Nazis. We have numerous museums in the former German Nazi concentration and extermination camps, all of them receiving solid state support. There are many new projects being developed. This year, the museum in Sobibor will open. The State Museum and Memorial of Auschwitz-Birkenau, which we will visit tomorrow, and the work devoted to protection of authenticity and stressing the role of education is recognized worldwide as a model example on how other post-genocide memorials should carry out their work. All our efforts are focused on the victims and the survivors, not on the politicians of today. It is therefore the Polish government welcomes with great appreciation the recent initiative of the new Austrian government to protect and commemorate the former Nazi German concentration camp in Gusen. We offer our full support in terms of sharing our expertise with our Austrian colleagues. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your invitation for this conference. On behalf of the Polish authorities, I would like to warmly welcome you and express the hope that the time spent in Poland will be for you an inspiring experience. Thank you very much.
Secretary of State, thank you, and once again we're honored to have you with us. And if you could pass on the symposium's best wishes as well to the Office of the President as well. And we thank you for that. And our last speaker for this particular panel, which is Welcome Remarks, is the President of the Austrian National Council, a man who's done a lot of really solid and good work in Austria, including steering Austria towards a full signatory status of the IHRA. It is my pleasure to welcome to address the symposium MP Wolfgang Sobotka, the President of the Austrian National Council. Thank you, sir.
Abraham Janasch and Batya Farkas, Abraham and Miriam Fixler, Shmuel Hersch and Lisa Fixler and their son George, Judith Grünfeld Fixler with her children Saul and Leah, Reb Wolf and Sarah Kneller with their children Dvora, Cyril and Yitzhak, Saul and Deborah Grünfeld. These are the names of just a few relatives Rivka Younger shared with me today. Relatives of blessed memory, relatives that were murdered in Auschwitz, murdered for no other reason than that they were Jewish. One of them, Judith Grünfeld, was pregnant when she was walked into the gas chambers. Rivka Younger, a historian and a